Imagine a city with almost no rivers, zero forests, and barely any farmland. We're talking about a place completely swallowed by unforgiving desert. Honestly, if you asked folks outside the region about this spot 50 years ago, they'd have zero clue what you were talking about. But flash forward to today, and it's literally one of the most famous cities on the planet. We're talking millions of tourists pouring in every single year, massive global companies setting up their headquarters, and some of the tallest, most absurdly expensive buildings on Earth standing right smack in the middle of this former desert. Welcome to our explainer on the Dubai Master Plan.
The contrast here is just absolutely wild. 100 years ago, this was a harsh, relatively unknown strip of sand where life was incredibly basic and honestly, just surviving the day was the main goal. It wasn't on anyone's radar. And today, it boasts the tallest skyscrapers in the world, jaw-dropping luxury hotels, millions upon millions of visitors. It's a literal overnight transformation, well, historically speaking, from a tiny, quiet settlement to this glittering, hypermodern metropolis.
So, looking at that kind of unbelievable glow-up begs a pretty simple but totally profound question. How exactly did Dubai pull off what so many other countries couldn't? Because let's be real, plenty of nations have tried to engineer this exact kind of rapid economic miracle and completely failed. Okay, let's dive into this and solve this geographical and economic mystery together. But to really get the master plan, we've got to go back to the baseline.
Chapter 1. The Desert Before the Boom.
Before all the glitz and glamour, life here in the early 1900s was tough. I mean, incredibly challenging. Today, Dubai looks like a sci-fi movie set, right? But back then, the economy was literally just three things: fishing, trading, and pearl diving. And the people were facing immensely harsh desert conditions every single day. Pearl diving, especially, was just grueling, dangerous work. Divers were holding their breath for minutes at a time, diving deep just to scrape up a handful of oysters. No luxury resorts, no giant international airports. Just a small, incredibly resilient community relying on the sea to survive. But then, everything shifted.
Chapter 2. The Strategic Oil Pivot.
So the 1960s roll around. Oil is discovered, and suddenly enormous amounts of wealth start flowing into the region. Now, we've seen this story before, right? History shows us that a lot of countries strike oil and then become completely, dangerously dependent on it. But Dubai's leadership saw a totally different future. By the mid-1960s, they had this absolutely critical realization. The oil was going to run out. It wouldn't last forever. So instead of falling into that classic trap of dependency, they made a massive pivot in the late 1960s. They decided to bet it all on infrastructure.
So the crucial point is how they spent that money. They immediately poured their new oil wealth into four foundational pillars. We're talking sprawling road networks to connect the region, deep water ports to handle massive cargo ships, international airports to open up the skies, and the robust utilities you need to support a rapidly booming population. They didn't just blow the cash on short-term luxuries. They laid down the concrete foundation, literally, for a future economy that wouldn't even need oil to survive. And with that base built, they were ready to weaponize their geography.
Chapter 3. Building a Global Hub.
Now here is a super powerful defining concept for you. Geography could be turned into money. Dubai's leaders figured out that their location was actually their biggest natural advantage. Think about it. They sit right smack in the middle of Europe, Asia, and Africa. If you were to draw lines connecting the world's biggest economies, those lines naturally cross right over the Persian Gulf. They realized, hey, if we can capture that middle ground, we can generate immense wealth. To pull off this trade hub idea, they used three distinct tactics. First up, infrastructure. They built massive ports to handle the physical goods moving around the world. Second, policy. They created these specialized trade zones that offered immense, almost unbeatable advantages for foreign companies. And third, business incentives. We're talking extremely aggressive perks, like 0% corporate and income taxes, just to lure those companies in, and it worked like a charm. International corporations looked at this irresistible combination and just started arriving in droves. But of course, ships and trade zones were only part of the master plan.
Chapter 4. The Airline Strategy.
Okay, this might be one of the absolute smartest moves in the entire playbook: aviation. The government threw its full weight and support behind the growth of Emirates Airline. Over time, Dubai systematically engineered itself into a major connecting point for international travel using a really brilliant hub-and-spoke model. Because of where they are on the map, passengers flying between totally different continents were basically naturally forced to lay over in Dubai. It transformed a tiny regional carrier into an absolute global titan. And eventually, it made Dubai International one of the busiest airports in the entire world, handling tens of millions of passengers every year.
Which brings us to the flashiest, most famous part of this strategy.
Chapter 5. The Business of Luxury.
Now, what's really interesting here is the psychology behind it. To pull this whole thing off, Dubai leaned into one single, profound idea. Attention creates money. They understood that if you want tourists and investors to fly all the way out to a desert, you have to buy the world's focus. You have to literally force the globe to look at you.
So what did they do? They launched wildly ambitious projects. We're talking hotels that completely redefined the word luxury, like the iconic Burj Al Arab. Massive artificial islands shaped like palm trees. The Palm Jumeirah that were so unbelievably huge, you could see them from space. And obviously, the tallest skyscraper ever constructed, the Burj Khalifa. These projects completely captured the global conversation. The whole world started talking about Dubai. And when the world talks, the tourists follow, the investors follow, and the businesses follow. The city's bold, futuristic image essentially became its strongest financial asset. But we have to be real here. Hyperconnected, rapid growth like this definitely does not come without fragility.
Chapter 6. Risks and Future Lessons.
To be completely objective about this, we have to look at the economic vulnerabilities the city faces today. Because it was explicitly built to be a global hub, it relies heavily on international trade and tourism. And that means when global recessions hit, they can fiercely impact local growth. We've also seen massive real estate bubbles pop up in their past, strictly because of that rapid, speculative expansion. Plus, there is increasing competition from other global cities that are now trying to replicate this exact same model. So yeah, maintaining this kind of rapid, hyper-connected success, it's incredibly difficult.
But when you look back at the big picture, while oil acted as the seed capital to get things started, it wasn't the thing that built the modern metropolis. The true drivers were strategy, infrastructure, massive international trade, and genius global branding. Dubai's rise really proves that long-term planning, intelligent execution, and just relentless ambition mattered way more over the decades than the natural resources they happened to find under the sand.
The cities that dominate the future are not always the ones with the most resources. They are often the ones with the clearest vision. It really leaves us to wonder, with this playbook now out in the open, what barren landscape out there will become the next Dubai? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep looking closely at the systems that build our world.